Your Serene Highness, Excellencies, Ministers and Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, dear friends of the Monaco Blue Initiative, I'd like to welcome you all to this 12th edition of the MBI. My name is Jeannie Godula, and it is my great pleasure and honor to be here with you in this beautiful conference room at the Oceanographic Museum of Monaco. Like so many of you, I have for so long admired Monaco's dedication to saving the world's oceans, a dedication deeply rooted in the Principality's own history. Alors, juste un mot en français. Sachez que si vous souhaitez avoir la traduction en français aujourd'hui, c'est possible. Il y a des casques pour ceux dans la salle. Et pour ceux qui sont à la maison, vous pouvez avoir la traduction sur Zoom. Pour choisir le français, il faut cliquer sur le petit globe dans le barre d'outils. Ensuite, couper l'audio original, c'est très important pour entendre la traduction. I was just saying to everyone, if you need translation, there are headsets here in the room, and for those of you at home, you can go on Zoom. Now, before we all get started, you all know as well as I do that in this new era of video conferencing, there's nothing worse or more distracting during speeches and panels than having mics unmuted or cameras on. So with that in mind, can I kindly ask all of those of you who are following us from home to please mute your microphones and make sure your cameras are switched off. Thank you in advance for that. Today we have the great honor and privilege of having His Serene Highness, Prince Albert II of Monaco, here with us. Thank you so much, Monseigneur. Always a pleasure to see you. Also with him today, we have His Excellency Mr. Bernard Fautrier, Plenipotentiary Minister and Special Advisor to His Serene Highness, the Sovereign Prince for Environment. Mr. Robert Calcagno, CEO of the Oceanographic Institute, Prince Albert I of Monaco Foundation, and Mr. Olivier Wendin, Vice President and CEO of the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. We're also pleased to have with us today in the room His Excellency Monsieur Laurent Stefanini, French Ambassador to the Principality of Monaco, His Excellency Mr. Giulio Alaimo, Italian Ambassador to the Principality of Monaco, Kristen Grauer, Consul General of the United States in Marseille, France, and Marie-Pierre Gramadia, Minister of Public Works, Environment and Urban Development, Government of Monaco. Now, I'd just like you all to take a moment to go back to this time last year. It's March 2020. The final preparations for the 11th Monaco Blue Initiative are underway when all of a sudden the event is canceled just a few days before due to the pandemic. But back then, both His Serene Highness and the MBI Steering Committee were determined not to let the pandemic put an end to the discussion. And so, the first ever all-digital edition of the MBI took place in 3 sessions in May and June 2020. Now, 1 year later, I think everyone here had all hoped that we could be able to be all together in person in Monaco. It turns out we're going to have to wait a bit longer, unfortunately. However, we are one step further than last year. This year, the MBI has gone hybrid, as you can see. Some in-person participation, but most of you attending online. So thank you so much to all of you for tuning in wherever you are. We'd also like to say a big thank you to our partners, Rolex and Barclays, for providing financial support to make this 12th edition possible. Now let me tell you a bit more about the exciting sessions that are coming up for you throughout the day. Our first session will look at the role of international negotiations for better ocean governance. Sessions 2 and 3 focus on the development of a truly sustainable, fair, and transparent blue economy and how to make that happen financially. The objective of these workshops is to come up with key recommendations to help boost the global ocean agenda that is in constant movement. They can inform the UN Oceans Conference, the IUCN World Conservation Congress, and the next meeting of the Convention on Biological Diversity, to name just a few. Let me now talk more specifically about this morning. First, His Serene Highness will give you his welcome address. We'll then have the privilege of hearing from His Excellency John Kerry, the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. That will be followed by remarks from Annick Girardin, the French Minister for Maritime Affairs. After that, we will head into a 40-minute exchange with our first panelist, then a 30-minute Q&A session where all of you will have the chance to make a brief statement or ask a question using the chat. All that's to come, though. First, it is my great honor to welcome His Serene Highness, Prince Albert II of Monaco. Monseigneur.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers amis, Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, a hearty welcome to the Principality of Monaco. Je voudrais souhaiter la bienvenue à Monaco à ceux et celles qui n'ont pu faire le déplacement, ceux qui sont présents, et remercier de leur implication ceux qui nous suivent par écran interposé. Cette 12e édition de la Monaco Blue Initiative se déroule comme la précédente dans un format particulier, ce que nous regrettons tous, bien sûr. Il est toujours plus agréable et souvent plus enrichissant de pouvoir échanger directement. Pour autant, je crois que nous commençons à nous habituer à ces débats à distance qui, après tout, contribuent aussi à préserver l'environnement en même temps que notre santé et qui devraient, j'espère, nous permettre d'échanger de manière constructive. Car l'essentiel est bien que nous puissions aujourd'hui être présents à ce rendez-vous annuel fixé avec les océans, avec leur avenir, avec notre avenir. Je veux donc me réjouir que cette rencontre puisse avoir lieu malgré la pandémie et je vous remercie tous de l'avoir rendu possible, en particulier les organisateurs, ma fondation et l'Institut Oceanographic. Je voudrais d'autant plus m'en réjouir que cette rencontre intervient au moment où se profilent des échanges des échéances particulièrement importantes. Il y a cette année le lancement de 2 décennies des Nations Unies de portée majeure, la décennie pour la restauration des écosystèmes et la décennie des sciences océaniques pour le développement durable. Il y a cette année aussi des sommets internationaux très attendus, la COP15 de la conférence sur la biodiversité biologique, qui aura lieu en Chine, et la COP26 de la conférence sur les changements climatiques qui aura lieu à Glasgow, en Écosse. Il y a aussi cette année le Congrès mondial de la nature organisé par l'UICN à Marseille, en France. Il y a bien sûr les négociations en cours à l'ONU, qui plus que jamais doivent se poursuivre, en particulier celles qui concernent la biodiversité au-delà des juridictions nationales. Or, ces échanges auxquels je pense un certain nombre d'entre nous contribuent ou contribueront font écho à des enjeux plus larges qui sont aussi au cœur de notre actualité. We stand at a juncture where our world is preparing to rebuild itself after a year of tragedy, crisis, and uncertainty, and is seeking to do so in a more sustainable and more responsible manner. This reconstruction offers us an unprecedented window of opportunity. I'd like to point out that the United Nations Environment Program recently estimated that recovery plans worldwide totaled $12 trillion. That represents close to 12% of global GDP. Much more than has ever been allocated to this type of investment for the future. If invested well, these funds, or even a fraction of them, could make a vital contribution to ocean protection. It is therefore currently a question of preparing for the many diplomatic and environmental meetings ahead and of shaping the prospects for economic recovery which are being developed. I believe that the best way of doing so and to doing this is to create dialogue between the various stakeholders concerned, to pool our knowledge, expertise, and resources, to establish shared diagnostics, ambitions, and strategies, and to increase our understanding of the way in which these various issues and various events are intertwined and bolster each other. This is the purpose of the program which is on our agenda today. It is aimed at coordinating the various levels of action more effectively. That is why we will speak about international negotiations first. They are diverse, as demonstrated by the meetings I have just mentioned, and they involve a wide range of players. Those from the international organizations concerned, of course, the ocean rallies institutions as diverse as UNEP, FAO, UNESCO, IMO, to name but just a few. However, these negotiations also concern civil society, private initiatives, and NGOs, which can and must make a contribution, as my foundation has been doing since COP21 in Paris. That is why it is important that we prepare for these upcoming meetings together. The same need for coordination will be the focus of our second roundtable session, which concerns the mobilization of businesses for the Sustainable Development Goals, and of course, Goal 14 in particular. We need to share experiences and understand how businesses can help us reach this goal. The aim here is for each of us to find new ways of progressing together. Third and last, we will talk about the mobilization of financial tools. Here again, it is a question of understanding the needs and solutions provided by the finance sector, but also for all the players involved to be more effective in engaging commitment. This can be achieved through partnerships, joint projects, as well as the creation of appropriate financial vehicles. As an example, I will refer to MedFund, which Monaco, France, and Tunisia created 8 years ago and is now operational and a prime contact for multilateral funding agencies. There's also the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, which my foundation initiated with the Vulcan Foundation, currently being developed with the support of the UNDP, several states, and major financial institutions such as BNP. With each of these issues, I believe we have a great deal to learn from everybody's experiences, a great deal to understand, and a great deal to develop together. That is why I'd like to thank you once again for your participation and your involvement, and for those who are here for your presence here today. Thank you very much.
Monseigneur, thank you very much. An unprecedented window of opportunity. This really is the moment we need to talk together and move forward together. Thank you so much. Now, former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is part of the Biden administration now in the role of the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. We are very pleased to be able to show you a video message he sent for all of us today.
Good morning, everybody. I want to thank the Oceanographic Institute and the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation for inviting me to share a few thoughts during the 12th edition of the Monaco Blue Initiative. And more broadly, I want to thank them for their partnership and for providing this forum to discuss some of the most pressing issues of our time. I'm proud to be President Biden's Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, now spending my days exclusively focused on the climate crisis and working hard to ensure that the United States and the global community are able to put the world on a safe path before it is too late. Advancing climate action has been a personal passion of mine for decades. But from the time I was a little boy, I was always in awe of the ocean. And I have made it central to my life's work to protect the bodies of water that cover 3/4 of our planet. The truth is, these passions are actually not distinct. Ocean stewardship and climate stewardship are really two sides of a single coin. We cannot protect the ocean without confronting the climate crisis. Greenhouse gas pollution is already having a devastating effect on the ocean, which is quite literally dying from climate impacts like warming and acidification. And it pains me to say, but we're heading toward an even more catastrophic future, because right now we are heading towards a more than 3 degrees Celsius warming across the planet. Make no mistake, nobody is getting the job done on what we set out to do in Paris. And in order to protect the ocean and the planet, it is absolutely essential now, we know, to try to hold the warming of the Earth to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, I recognize and I deeply regret that the United States, at the national level, has been absent in the global climate fight in recent years. But even as I say that, I can tell you that governors in America and mayors in America stayed in the Paris Agreement. And I can tell you that rejoining the Paris Agreement was a day one priority. And we are now doing everything in our power and all of the government initiative to make up for lost time. Second, we cannot fight the climate crisis without the power of the ocean. The ocean is a source of sustainable climate solutions. And frankly, we're not in a position to leave any climate solution on the table. On the mitigation side, we have to tap the potential of sustainably sited offshore renewable energy. We have to protect and restore our coastal blue carbon ecosystems And we have to decarbonize the international shipping sector, which currently produces as much greenhouse gas pollution as a G7 country. Just think of the jobs that this work will create. The fact is that we are looking at the possibilities of the greatest economic transformation the world has seen since the Industrial Revolution. And that's not an exaggeration. The climate market, the effort to change our energy policy, will be the largest market the world has ever known. And climate and ocean actions are not inconsistent with a thriving economic recovery. In fact, they are foundational to it. On the adaptation side, we have to work to create resilience in the face of climate crisis. It is already affecting individual species and entire ecosystems, and only 5% of the ocean today has any form of protection, and only 2% is strongly protected. I was very proud of the work we did during the Obama administration in this vein, including the creation of the record-breaking Ross Sea Marine Protected Area. But we have so much more to do globally. The fact is that fishing is now a major crisis. And I hate to say it, but individual countries have chosen to put big fleets of fishing vessels out on the ocean, on the high seas, without observation, and they are literally strip mining the ocean of fish and of the fauna. So we face a monumental task. But I am heartened by the leadership of everybody here today, and I can promise you that the United States is working and will continue to work in our all-of-government effort. We'll do everything we can to do our part. For example, we're working to conserve 30% of U.S. lands and waters by 2030 to protect biodiversity and natural carbon storage. We're working to scale up offshore wind energy in order to help support our goal to achieve a carbon-free power sector by 2035. And we will be working to reduce carbon emissions from the global shipping sector as well. And in the coming weeks, we look forward to announcing our new Nationally Determined Contribution, NDC as we call it, our emissions reduction target through the Paris Agreement for the Glasgow meeting in November. Both the climate crisis and the dire state of our ocean absolutely require us to work not as individual countries, but as a global community. And there'll be no shortage of opportunities for us to work together this year to protect our ocean. BBNJ to COP26, we have the chance to do it, and there's no time to waste. We have to apply every lever to create a future for the ocean that is a biodiverse, climate-resilient, and free from carbon pollution entity. Because the health of our ocean is central to our economies, our ecosystems, our communities, and to life itself on this planet. So thank you for all you are doing in this fight, and I look forward to working with you on the road to Glasgow and beyond.
A very big thank you to Secretary John Kerry, America's new climate czar. And as he said, climate stewardship and ocean stewardships are two sides of the same coin. We're going to stay on that same theme now with our next keynote speech. This is from the French Maritime Minister, Annick Girardin.
Monseigneur, Monsieur l'envoyé spécial des États-Unis en charge du climat, Monsieur le Président de l'Institut Oceanographic, Mesdames et Messieurs, actuellement à Bruxelles, pour participer au Conseil des ministres européens de la pêche, je regrette de ne pouvoir être parmi vous pour cette 12e édition de la Monaco Blue Initiative. J'ai néanmoins tenu à m'adresser à vous. La Monaco Blue Initiative est un rendez-vous incontournable pour la gestion et la conservation des océans. Vous le savez, Monseigneur, j'ai toujours soutenu l'action de votre fondation et nous avons souvent eu l'occasion d'être rassemblés lors d'événements maritimes ou consacrés au climat en tant que secrétaire d'État au développement et à la francophonie ou comme ministre des Outre-mer ou aujourd'hui comme ministre de la mer. Vous êtes à l'origine du Medfund qui protège déjà 3000 km². Vous êtes membre fondateur de la plateforme Océan et Climat. Vous vous mobilisez pour les coraux et vous êtes désormais à nos côtés pour animer la coalition pour une Méditerranée exemplaire. Je voudrais particulièrement vous remercier sur un point, La connaissance des océans fait défaut aux décideurs et j'y suis confrontée tous les jours. Les travaux de l'Institut Oceanographic sont irremplaçables à cet égard. Les grandes expéditions d'Albert Ier trouvent aujourd'hui leur prolongement dans les campagnes d'exploration des grands fonds que je soutiens. Il reste encore un long chemin avant que chacun prenne conscience de sa dépendance à l'océan. La pandémie a montré que notre quotidien dépend des services que rendent les océans. La solidarité, c'est la résilience, et celle des gens de mer a permis à nos sociétés de continuer à fonctionner. La mer n'est pas une discontinuité, mais le lien indéfectible qui unit plus qu'il ne sépare. Dans cette représentation, l'océan en tant que bien commun prend tout son sens. Je le précise, ce n'est pas une notion juridique qui ouvrirait de nouveaux droits, mais bien une notion morale qui rappelle notre responsabilité commune. La France reste très attachée aux libertés des mers consacrées par la Convention de Montego Bay. Cela me permet d'en venir au premier sujet de vos discussions. Comment améliorer la gouvernance des océans ? Je vois 3 éléments de progrès essentiels. D'abord, il faut conclure cette année le futur traité de protection de la biodiversité en haute mer, dit BBNJ. Deuxièmement, il faudrait faire évoluer le concept de zone économique exclusive. Je défends l'idée qu'elles deviennent des zones économiques et écologiques exclusives. Et puis troisièmement, il faut mettre en œuvre dans chaque pays et même dans chaque région côtière une gouvernance nationale et territorialisée de la mer. Après 30 ans d'absence, le ministère de la mer a été recréé. Je mesure le défi de faire cohabiter les usages et les usagers, les espaces et les espèces. La planification locale est la clé d'une bonne gouvernance des océans. Parfois, je me sens un peu seule à l'international. Il me faudrait un homologue dans chaque pays maritime. Nous serions ainsi mieux organisés pour répondre aux immenses défis d'un développement maritime durable. C'est le sens de l'objectif du développement durable numéro 14 des Nations Unies, lequel est au cœur des politiques publiques du ministère de la Mer. Dans les administrations, les collectivités, les organismes de coopération également, la mer est sous-investie. C'est flagrant. C'est également vrai au niveau des entreprises. Je soutiens en France les initiatives qui leur serviront de baromètre. Les référentiels et les labels en cours de mise en place, la France ne peut pas en être absente. La responsabilité du ministère de la Mer, c'est aussi d'aider les entreprises à mesurer leur impact sur l'océan, à s'améliorer et le faire savoir. La mer n'est pas le nouvel Eldorado financier et les États doivent y veiller en jouant leur rôle de régulateur afin de développer la finance bleue. L'océan est encore un territoire largement inconnu pour la finance privée. Pourtant, investir dans la bonne santé des océans a un excellent retour sur investissement. J'ai identifié le besoin de créer, sous l'impulsion d'investisseurs publics, un marché du capital risque capable de transformer les innovations en nouvelles filières industrielles. Nous devons aussi développer de nouveaux supports d'investissement comme les obligations bleues et des mécanismes de partage du risque entre acteurs publics et privés pour financer les technologies plus mûres. L'économie bleue doit ainsi constituer un des piliers des plans de relance. Nous devons reconstruire mieux et en bleu. La décarbonation des navires, les énergies marines renouvelables, la construction d'une pompe à carbone bleu vont représenter dans la prochaine décennie un marché de plus de 1 000 milliards d'euros. Rien que le marché des algues en Europe pourrait atteindre 9,3 milliards d'euros et créer 115 000 emplois d'ici 2030. Monseigneur, cher Albert, je fais le vœu de vous rendre visite à Monaco lors d'un prochain événement. Après la pandémie mondiale, nous devrons tous travailler ensemble pour que la santé et l'exploitation durable des océans deviennent un vrai relais de prospérité. Je vous remercie.
A very warm thank you to Annick Girardin for her keynote speech. We must build back better and in blue. I think everyone here and all of you at home definitely agree with that. But how do we get there? That is the big question, and hopefully we can come up with some answers in our first panel discussion today, the role of international negotiations for better ocean governance. Moderating this session for you will be Dr. Sébastien Treyer, Executive Director, Institute for Sustainable Development and International Relations in Paris. A big thank you, first of all, to Sébastien for accepting this role. With him, a very distinguished panel. Those panelists are Sophie Mirgaux, Special Envoy for the Ocean, Belgium, Dr. Bruno Oberle, Director General, IUCN, Dr. Alexander Shestakov, Director, Science, Society and Sustainable Futures Division, Secretariat of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. Dr. Vladimir Ryabinin, Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, where he's also Assistant Director General. Dr. Susan Gardner, Director, Ecosystems Division, UN Environment Program. And Dr. Harriet Hardin Davies, Edinburgh Ocean Leader, University of Wollongong. We should discover them all now on screen, I believe. Yes, there they are. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for participating with us today. Now, before I hand the microphone over to Sébastien, I just want to remind all of our attendees that we will take questions after the panel discussion. So please, all of you at home, keep your microphones muted and your cameras off, but do feel free to start sending in your name and your questions on the chat. Sébastien, I'll leave it to you. The floor is yours for the next 40 minutes.
Thank you very much for having invited me, Your Serene Highness, Excellencies, Ministers. I really want to thank first Monaco and the organizers of the MBI for this invitation. I mean, this impetus that is given every year in this forum for political processes that do matter for the ocean is extremely valuable. I want to also just introduce in a few words the fact that we've been hearing from Special Envoy John Kerry and from Minister Girardin how important the ocean is when we look at the economic crisis in which we are situated, but that the economic sectors are not conscious enough about what's happening on the ocean, what could be done or what's happening in the ocean. I'm not completely sure that we should only look at the ocean as not present enough in political decisions. To some extent, another side of the same coin is also the fact that the ocean is extremely representative of both the necessity to cooperate to protect marine ecosystems and the rising tensions on resources ownership between countries. So the ocean is becoming extremely geopolitical in recent years. We've seen that with the action of different countries in different regional seas. And I think that's, to me, an extremely important moment for ocean governance. We have a window of opportunity, as Prince Albert II has been saying. But at the same time, we see also that nations are competing and are even conflicting over the ocean, and that is an extremely tense moment for this window of opportunity. Last point, you have seen from the composition of the panel that, of course, in that particular moment, science needs to play a key role. We still need to understand better our ocean, to understand how it functions. And to some extent, if we want to foster collaboration, cooperation between those nations that are conflicting, science has to play a key role. I will not present again the eminent panelists that have been gathered for this first panel, and I will directly go to my first round of my first question, for which I would ask each of you six to give a first statement. So my first question is actually to try and take stock of what we already have done. We know that we still have things to do, but the ocean governance framework has been building up for years. We now have hundreds of global and regional agreements. I hope we will soon have also complemented it with the CBD framework, the biodiversity framework, the BBNJ negotiation outcome. But I want, one of the things that is striking to me is that the gap in implementation is still huge. And I would like to ask you, according to you, what do we need to fill this implementation gap? How can we increase the effectiveness of the legal and the policy instruments, and really make a difference for our ocean? And I would turn first to Madame Sophie Mirgaux, because you're the special envoy for Belgium, so you're negotiating these legal instruments, but you're also probably trying to look at how does Europe and Belgium, how do you implement, or what are the obstacles that you face implementing these legal instruments? What would be your first comment on this?
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for giving me the floor. I think that, let me start with an example which is actually also future related. So it's maybe taking your question and going a little bit to another direction. But I think that when we adopted the Aichi targets, which we set, for example, marine protected areas at 10%, we didn't have, and we still don't have actually a mechanism to create marine protected areas outside national jurisdiction on the high seas that have global recognition. And now we are about to embark on taking an even more ambitious target, and Belgium, amongst others, have set a target for 30%, which inside national jurisdiction, that is one thing. For Belgium, for example, we have 37% protected areas. But outside national jurisdiction, how do you start with this? At this moment, there are some regional initiatives which are geographically limited in participation. There are some initiatives or marine protected areas that protect from a specific type of activity, but there is no holistic approach. There's no system at this point. And this leads us straight to this little baby of mine, which I have been working on for years, which is BBNJ, the alleged BBNJ agreement, biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, which is still in negotiation, which could have been finalized, but due to the pandemic, we had to be creative. And I really do believe that for a number of the high ambitions that we set ourselves, we have ambitions and we do not have the structure in which to implement them. And this 30% target, or even the 10% target, is an example of this. So in order to reach the ambitions that we set ourselves, we have to create a structure which allows us to set these ambitions into, or to turn these ambitions into reality. And that is why I think that we need to find a match between ambitions and how to implement them, or how to even agree with them, and how to form a platform where the different actors that are doing the actual implementation, like for example, the regional fisheries management organizations, the International Maritime Organization, the regional organizations, where they can come together and work on these ambitions and the actual created marine protected areas. And I hope that the BBNJ agreement will be able to fill at least one part of that gap.
Thank you very much, Madame Mirgaux. That was extremely well, looking at both what still needs to be negotiated and how we already need to prepare in advance for it to be implemented and implementable. I wanted now to turn to Bruno Oberle. Cher Bruno, you are General Director of IUCN, but you also have had responsibilities as Minister for the Environment in Switzerland. How do you see these gaps to implementation, and how would you formulate what we still need to work on beyond the continuation of negotiation?
Thank you, Sébastien. Your Highness, ladies and gentlemen, for almost 20 years, IUCN has been one of the key players bringing the issue of rising risks and threats to marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdictions to international attention, and promoting the need for a better use of existing instrument as well as a new instrument, UNCLOS. Drawing on this experience, I can say that to increase the effectiveness of global and regional agreement, we need to focus on 3 C's: commitment, collaboration, coherence. For commitment, we need to commit to strengthening implementation of the agreements we already have in place. We need to recommit to applying the environmental rule of law principles adopted 50 years ago in Stockholm, 1972, and give them some teeth. For this, we need improved monitoring, auditing, and compliance reviews to deter the free riders in the system. For the collaboration, our point of departure is we can no longer afford to be at war with each other across sectors and jurisdictions. All nations, industrial sectors, scientists, civil society, indigenous people, and local communities need to become allies in making peace with the planet. We need to recognize our interdependence and connectivity with the global ocean and adopt whole ocean solution. We must back our commitment with financial resources for those who need it, so that all nations and people have the capacity to sustain ocean-based livelihoods, combat the effects of climate change on ocean and coastal zones, and safeguard marine biodiversity for the benefit of current and future generations. For the coherence, we need whole of government support for integrated action, both to combat climate change and to stem the loss of biodiversity. Minister Girardin said it, so many countries, so few countries have been coordinating ministries. And too often we see different responses from the same government at different meetings. As a result, the organization we charge with stewarding our resources in a way that protects the marine environment are challenged by conflicting mandates and priorities. More fish, cheaper shipping, and cheaper minerals have for too long been our driving goals. This is not a recipe for a sustainable blue economy. The high-level panel for a sustainable blue economy called for a whole-of-government commitment to 100% sustainability supported through detailed ocean plans. Let's seize those plans in place for the global ocean by 2030. With the 3 C's, commitment, collaboration, and coherence, we can fill the implementing gap. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oberle. That was extremely structured, and we see all the work we need to do on these 3 C's. I wanted now to turn to Dr. Harriet Harden-Davis. Harriet, you're an Edinburgh ocean leader, so that makes you one of the key representatives of the ocean scientific community. How would you answer that question about, from your vision as a scientist, on what still needs to be done in terms of implementation gap?
Well, thank you so much, Sébastien, and my thanks to the organizers for inviting me. Good morning, distinguished delegates, and hello, friends. It's nice to see some familiar faces and names. There's 3 types of tools that I'd like to highlight this morning. The first, legal tools, the second, capacity, and the third, innovation. Firstly, as Madame Mirgaux and Monsieur Oberle mentioned, we need mechanisms to bring the international community together to consider the ocean as a whole. The development of the new BBNJ treaty is absolutely crucial in this regard, to create a forum that will bring states together and enable governments to act as stewards by establishing protected areas in 2/3 of the ocean and dealing with environmental impacts. It is also hoped that this decision-making process will create mechanisms for science advice, so those decisions are based on the best available science, sharing information, and also funding. After more than a decade of negotiations at this final stage, this is a very exciting moment. The second area where I see the potential for new tools is in capacity. Once we have those commitments, how do we have the capacity to deliver on them? All states and ocean stakeholders might need capacity in many forms: policy, law, and science and technology. That capacity exists at various levels, at individual levels, institutional levels, and international levels. How do we build this capacity? Training people, access to information, funding infrastructure, and making sure that support doesn't stop when equipment is delivered are just the beginning. Capacity building is a long-term process that works best as a partnership that's equitable. Tools to build those types of partnerships include things like assessing needs, designing strategies to meet those needs, and crucially, monitoring the outcomes of capacity building initiatives. And the third point I'd like to highlight is innovation. Where concepts have become outdated, we need new ideas to take hold, to augment or replace them. It was exciting to hear Minister Girardin referring to an exclusive economic and ecologic zone this morning. The last time we saw some serious innovation in the space of ocean governance was perhaps in the 1960s with the evolution of the common heritage of mankind principle to replace old ideas around a free-for-all in the ocean. a contemporary example of the type of innovation we could look to now is legal recognition of rights of nature. Giving rights to a river in New Zealand, recognizing rights of Mother Nature in Ecuador are just two examples of something which is developing fast all around the world. These approaches reframe human relationships with nature not as one of rights and resources, but as one of reciprocity. This concept is pretty new to ocean governance and could teach us a lot about innovating in how we manage the ocean. And that's what I mean by innovation. So in summary, legal tools to bring us together to set that commitment that Monsieur Oberle mentioned, capacity to implement it and give us the structures, as Madame Mirgaux referred to, and innovation to keep us on our toes and thinking about new ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Harden-Davies. This was extremely useful. Do you hear me? Because I was asked to wear a headset for better. Thank you very much. I just wanted to be sure of that. I think you all structure your talks to a way that is very well linking one with the other. And I wanted now to turn to Dr. Alexander Shestakov from the CBD Secretariat, so the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. Dr. Shestakov, how do you see from the CBD's point of view this implementation challenge? I know that, of course, we are still, as for BBNJ, in the process of negotiating the post-2020 framework for global biodiversity governance. But still, how do you assess what also needs to be ensured to ensure effectiveness of the commitments that we take?
Good morning, Sébastien. Thank you. And thanks a lot to Monaco Blue Initiative for inviting us to be part of it. We are really happy to do it on a regular basis. So I believe that while we definitely have to acknowledge great steps taken by many countries to address various aspects of marine biodiversity loss, and also important for improving the state of the ocean, we also can see sometimes that some new initiatives, they pretty costly, and they divert certain investments also sometimes from being effective and timely in implementation. So we definitely need to do better at considering the costs of long-term, sustainable, and effective implementation of those new tools and frameworks which we establish. And I hope that the dialogue today and the next sessions will cover it as well. We also have enormous data gap in many parts of the ocean. And that is true in many developing countries, but also for the deep sea and open sea areas. And while this does not mean that we can't take any actions while the knowledge is not there, it does severely limit our ability to effectively and adaptively manage and to identify and prioritize those areas which are more in need of attention. And as you know, under the CBD is a process to describe ecologically or biologically significant marine areas has aimed to address this by describing and mapping more than 320 EPSAs so far. But the process has also shown how little we still know about the ocean. We also need to do better at sharing existing knowledge, which we already have, and addressing the huge disparity in the quantity and quality of marine data between countries, and in particular between the global north and south. One issue that we have also seen in our assessment of achieving Aichi targets, which, as you know, last year was the last year of our strategic plan, is actually lack of engagement of economic sectors in biodiversity issues. Many sectors have traditionally not considered biodiversity to be an asset, and actually not even to be an issue of concern for them. However, it's clear now that a productive economy depends on biodiversity, and that we need to do better at considering nature as an asset to be invested in. And I think we saw it pretty clearly from the recent Dasgupta review. And finally, we also need to better engage non-coastal countries in ocean-related issues. Many of those countries not only have a stake in the services that ocean provides, but are also important part of value chain for ocean-derived products, and are parties to various international instruments, thus also have to be and play an important role in conservation and sustainable use. And we also hope that upcoming post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will be one of those platforms to engage everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shestakov, for these very useful words of also including not only the how did Madame Girardin say, the maritime countries, but also the countries that have no access to the sea. That's probably something that we need to particularly focus on for global ocean. I now want to turn to Madame Susan Gardner, Director for Ecosystems, the Ecosystems Division at UN Environment. And as you also have this experience of working in science or in ecosystems protection, both in the Mexican and US administrations for governments, how do you see this challenge of implementing those commitments that we take at the international scale?
Well, thank you. I mean, you have a panel of great expertise, and they brought forward many remarkably insightful suggestions. It's certainly true that the world did not meet any of the global biodiversity targets that were set for 2020. And so moving forward, we need just not just more ambition, but certainly greater commitment towards delivering on the actions, as Bruno had pointed out. I would suggest we also need more investments in nature-based solutions. There's a growing understanding now of the benefits that are provided by oceans. And there's so much potential in this moment to unlock the extraordinary power of nature to address what we consider the triple planetary crisis that includes climate, pollution, as well as biodiversity, while at the same time supporting social economic security. And we've seen so many great examples of this in Kenya and Madagascar, places where there have been piloting blue carbon finance schemes, where local communities can engage in things like mangrove management that can sustain natural carbon storage and at the same time generate carbon funds that goes back to local stakeholders. And it then creates also additional co-benefits like storm protection, like fisheries, like livelihoods. But we have seen, for example, in Oxford's Economic Recovery Project and UNEP's report recently launched, that only about 18% of the recovery efforts that have been announced could be considered green or blue. So that sort of points to another issue, which is that we have a big opportunity right now in innovative financing to move governments to invest more sustainably in blue stimulus as part of economic recovery from the pandemic. And this is a place where, for example, we have new guides on turning the tide, guidelines for how to finance sustainable ocean recovery that points to guidance for financial institutions to be able to shift towards more nature positive solutions. A great example of this is the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, where it's a multi-party initiative that has the ambition to raise $500 million for coral reef just through blended finance type instruments. A big part of the solution is to encourage blue stimulus by having good information and transparency so that we can really ensure that there's awareness of the cost of investment today, but also the cost of those choices on our sustainable future tomorrow. And finally, I'd say that ocean governance that delivers on effective ocean protection is essential. As we heard from others, the scientific evidence is there that shows that at least 30% of the world's oceans have to be safeguarded for a healthy, resilient marine environment. But we do know that quantity is not the same as quality. And so protected areas need to meet some minimum requirements, and we need to ensure that we know that combinations of roles for government, but also local stakeholders, private sector, it's particularly important in terms of performance of marine protected areas. And we do have some really good examples of how to do this. We know, for example, in Jamaica, have been examples where local community was involved in the design of protected areas, and as a result had thriving success in marine protected area performance. So I would just say in summary, sort of those three areas is that we can invest in really powerful and cost-effective nature-based solutions. We can promote innovative financing to unlock sustainable blue economy and enhance and ensure that we have inclusive ocean governance. Thanks.
I would like now to turn to Dr. Vladimir. Head of the International Oceanographic Commission, so particularly working on the role of science for ocean governance. How do you assess from your point of view the importance of?
Thank you, Sébastien. I could guess what you were saying and what you were asking. So, Your Serene Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all courtesies observed. You know, after this 5 responses, so I feel some necessity to summarize where we are. And, you know, excellent ideas have been already put forward. So it is, I think, useless for me to put a new set of ideas. But I think it's very important to realize where we are in the whole process of saving the ocean. Indeed, we had around 100 different agreements and negotiation processes underway. Some of them are legally binding. Most of them are not so legally binding, I would say inspirational agreements. They do not really go into the domain of economy, and because of that, they are not engaged those mechanisms that are most influential in the system. So I think we need to find a common philosophy and strategic approach to the ocean. And I would like to say that I think in the deliberations of a high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, in many other fora, what is emerging now is a new understanding of how we have to address the ocean issues. And this is integrated ocean management based on plans that are also in turn based on good science. So these plans will manifest through coastal zone management approaches, maritime special planning, through establishment of science-based and also effective marine protected areas, fisheries, aquaculture management is part of the game as well. And of course, climate change. John Kerry spoke about this. So I think the emerging system with more ministers of the sea, with more agencies involved in coordination at the national level, I think we are getting there a little bit more slowly than is required. And the science is indeed the driving force for that, because as Alexander said, we don't know a lot about the ocean. So in the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, we indeed try to unite this all towards integrated ocean management based on science. And the key elements there, I would say, are 3, apart from different ways of managing the ocean, that would be creating an objective knowledge of the ocean that is based on data and observations, and that is translated also into, excuse me, ways of managing the ocean. But they cannot leave anyone behind. So capacity development is incredibly important. I would like also to refer to Harriet, what she said, because, you know, we speak about economy, about valuation, but that is important. But, you know, there is also one important thing. We need to change our human relation with the ocean. We have to change our behavior. So, you know, a new level of morality is required. And the ocean domain offers to us that platform to be better people in our relations with the ocean. And that is manifested in the better understanding of the value of the ocean, not only in terms of economy, but also in terms of spiritual value. So I think there is a paradigm emerging, and by combined efforts, we will be able to get there. And all these agreements will come together through the science-based ocean management. Thank you very much, Sébastien.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ryabinin. I'm sorry. Please accept my apologies for the problems with my microphone. I hope it's getting better. I wanted to turn to you a second round of questions. I think if we want to keep some time for questions with the audience, I might want to ask you to be as concise as possible in this second round of questions. And to some extent, the idea was to now turn really to the future, but also to the obstacles that we might be facing in terms of international cooperation. I've been emphasizing as my introductory point the idea that we are both in a moment where countries do collaborate on the ocean, and at the same time there are areas where they are conflicting about trying to gain ownership over oceans. So how would you successively pinpoint what is to you the major blocking factors, the major challenges in terms of fostering cooperation and commitment, as Bruno was saying, and also what are how can we do better? What are the next crucial points of what the Prince called this political window of opportunity? I wanted to turn directly to Harriet, because you've been extremely useful in proposing wordings for what we need to innovate in. How do you think we could also politically innovate in this world where we have both tensions and cooperation?
Thank you so much. I think one of the first challenges that we see before us is the challenge of managing an ocean which is ecologically connected from a governance system that is more disconnected. And as several colleagues and yourself have mentioned, that means that it's a barrier to us as a global community working together, in the words of John Kerry. And it can also mean that cooperation is more about not getting in the way rather than working together collaboratively. I think the two areas that we can see to draw on the solutions earlier is firstly, this forum created by the new BBNJ agreement as being a critical glue to pull a lot of different things together. And secondly, the idea of innovation. To borrow an idea from rights of nature laws, having something like a council of ocean custodians to provide a voice for people who do not currently have a voice in such spaces, and even a voice for the ocean itself. The second set of challenges I'd like to briefly touch on is, as Dr. Ryabinin mentioned, leaving no one behind in this process. We know that not all have the capacity to fully implement ocean conservation treaties. Eradicating inequality by 2030, and I quote, is a tremendous vision in the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. Not about just doing science, but applying that science for the good of all. One of the ways that we can, I think, evolve the framework for capacity building is by challenging narratives that position it as a donor-recipient relationship and thinking about it far more about a partnership. That way we can ensure that the mechanisms we put in place do not perpetuate inequities or difficult power balances, but rather give us that framework for working together as partners and collaborating as custodians for the global ocean. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this these remarks from your side, Dr. Harden-Davis. Dr. Ryabinin, I want to turn to you also from the science point of view. What can science do, and what are the major obstacles or challenges that might be overcome through science, even if the problems are mostly political, I would say?
Thank you very much, Sébastien. I think I can be extremely short, and because actually you already gave the answer in your question. Because indeed there are political issues, there are economic interests, there are negotiations. They always are done on the basis of certain assumptions and certain standings. And I think it is indeed the science and the objectivity of knowledge about the ocean and the related transparency that comes out of the scientific knowledge that is unquestionable, despite the uncertainties, with estimated uncertainties, that can really open the door. Because if we have a database that really objectively describes the state of the ocean, that is also able to describe the future of the ocean, and also the consequences of our actions that are based on the best science, then I think we have much better grounds for agreeing on something that would be otherwise divided by different political stands or different economic interests. So I would say that this management of the ocean based on science would be that magic wand, that not really magic, this requires a lot of work, but actually this would really turn the tide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ryabinin. Madam Gardner, from your side, what do you see are the main political challenges and the way ahead in those various political processes to foster?
I would add to the comments already made, I would add a connection between the national biodiversity strategies and action plan to the work of the regional Cs. This would be extremely valuable. Having a clear role for regional Cs to deliver on a global framework could provide a more coherent approach and also to help focus capacity building. I think we also need to better align regional and global targets, including things like regional reporting that would be described in the marine elements of a global biodiversity framework. Having clearer guidelines and clearer capacity building targets would have the advantage of connecting the global frameworks with the existing regional mechanisms. So that could be very powerful, including to connect with available resources. I strongly agree with those before me who talked about the importance of science and a strong science-based approach for guiding interventions. I think we know that science has to be the basis for action, and that the more we know, the easier it is for better collaboration and alignment on the path forward. I mean, it's quite incredible that only about 19% of the ocean floor has been mapped, which essentially means we know more about the moon than we do about the ocean. And we know very little about what the cumulative effect of human stressors are. So filling that information knowledge gap will help us very much to focus our priorities. I also agree that there's an unprecedented opportunity right now with the 2 decades. And these simultaneous decades complement each other, and they present this unique opportunity both for raising awareness and also for advancing science-based solutions to catalyze collaborative actions. I think we can see through these decades an alignment on a common set of priorities, like aligning research, investments, initiatives. Aligning advocacy is very valuable. And to innovate sort of these practical, cost-effective ocean conservation and restoration tools for science-based policy advice. I think with all of that, the result of the shared effort can be exponentially greater than the sum of the parts. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Madam Gardner. Now I'd like to turn to Dr. Alexander Shestakov. From the CBD's point of view, how do you see the main challenges of the next political processes for negotiation, and how to foster collaboration rather than facing obstacles?
So maybe a couple points we learned also from implementation of Aichi targets, and we like to build on those lessons learned for the post-2020. So the one is probably very much rooted in the outdated notion of conservation versus exploitation. We know very clearly that conservation and sustainable use are basically 2 sides of the same coin and can't be dealt without each other. So, and the point of what we call usually biodiversity mainstreaming, bringing biodiversity considerations into sectors, is key for ensuring collaboration across what we usually call conservation and exploitation sectors. And there are probably a couple elements there. One is definitely, and what colleagues were already talking about, that's dialogue at international level to increase this collaboration. I think Susan mentioned the regional CIS agreement, but it's also very important that regional CIS agreements are actually talking to regional fishery organizations, and they collectively can find a way to move forward, and they align their goals and targets. And for example, within the CBD, we have a Sustainable Ocean Initiative global dialogue among regional seas and fishery bodies working together with UNEP and FAO in it. And the second dimension of the same issue, which probably is even more important and which we found probably the main impediment in a good implementation and collaboration, is actually collaboration at the national level across ministries and agencies. The lack of this coordination at national, subnational level leads to different priorities, different goals, different targets, different reporting, and basically decrease the efficiency of our operations at international for and lead to a kind of a piecemeal translation of global policies into the national level. So we see it as a key way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shestakov. I turn now to Madame Sophie Mirgaux. Being really involved in those negotiations, maybe you can also have, if you have an answer to that, there is a question in the chat about what are the main blocking factors in the BBNJ negotiation from your point of view. But how do you operative action in those global negotiations?
Yes, I'm not going to repeat some of the very good comments that my co-panelists have answered to this question. I think what I was going to say actually links up to two questions which I saw in the chat. An obstacle that we have at this moment and which we will need to overcome, and it sounds very down to earth, and I apologize for this, is the lack of physical meetings and how we as international negotiators or multilateral negotiators, how we need to reinvent ourselves and make it feasible also to be able to make steps forwards or to take steps forwards without physically meeting. And I was very much, in the beginning of the pandemic, I was very much a supporter of the good sides of not needing to travel, lowering our carbon footprint, etc. But now I'm noticing that we do need to take into account that technologically it is not always possible to have the same types of meetings as we've had before. The fact that the Earth is still very much a round globe is also not helping this situation where some always seem to be excluded. And so we will need to find a way to work with that and to step up from how we have until now this past year been able to keep the momentum, which I think all of us have worked very hard on and which we have been successful with, to at the same time overcoming obstacles that technical or geographic obstacles, as well as not being giving in to delays or that are due to political will, basically the lack of political will to advance, and that is something that we do need to overcome. I know that there's a lot of alliances being built. I mean, Belgium is part of an alliance called the Blue Leaders, which are trying to aim at advancing and finalizing the BBNJ agreement, which is going for a 30 by 30 target through a network of highly and fully protected areas. So there is political will from a huge number of countries who get together and who try on different levels, both the technical negotiating levels as well as the higher political commitment levels, to keep us on our toes. And so I think we need to go from that level of commitment to actually being able to make more progress on actual texts, which we do need to finalize. Now, specifically regarding BBNJ, I think the major challenge for us is to not make this toothless dragon, let's say, to make this something which has ambition and which has the capacities to put that ambition into practice. And for my favorite topic, or my favorite, I say this because I've been working mostly on this, of marine protected areas, is that we need to look at, for example, management measures and management plans as well as part of this. And we need to involve existing and competent organizations. But we do need to come down to a concrete management plan for any marine protected area that this future agreement will set up, because otherwise we will just have words and we will not have actions or teeth or monitoring or checkups of what has actually been done. And that cannot be our intention, and that is not our intention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame Mirgaux. And now, Mr. Oberle. I mean, of course, one of the key milestones ahead of us is the IUCN Congress for Nature. We hope, I mean, from our side at Bbng, we hope it's going to take place really this year in September. And I know that everybody's working hard for that to happen. How would you see, with that in mind, but of course, on a larger scale, as you want, the main opportunities and the main challenges of the political way forward?
Yes, we hope it too. We are preparing for the World Conservation Congress in Marseille in September. We have all options on the table, from the in-person plus hybrid until a complete virtualized Congress. And of course, the marine issue is part of the discussion, independently of the setting we will have then. And then to answer your question, so the current level of international cooperation is improving, but it is still insufficient. To overcome the problem facing areas beyond national jurisdiction, we must strengthen and promote an holistic legal framework and apply the precautionary approach. With a new international legally binding instrument on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, we will have a critical opportunity to enable an holistic approach to ocean governance for the high seas. In synthesis, what we need, it is first a sufficient monitoring, control, and surveillance. We have to, secondly, emphasize the long-term economic benefit in comparison with the short-term profit of these new policies. This is the only way to make this action national priorities. And thirdly, we must coordinate between the many international organizations that exist, so that we do repeat efforts and promote parallel processes. What are we, IUCN, doing about all this? IUCN has, on one side, set a number of enable conditions and recommendations for the implementation of an ambitious and future-proof treaty. IUCN develops an overarching framework outlining the big picture of opportunities and needs for achieving enhanced marine conservation via the different international policy processes, among other UNFCCC, CPD, Ramsar, and so on. IUCN provides governments and other stakeholders detailed, regularly updated recommendations related to the specific processes and priority opportunities in line with the framework. And we are advocating for and support champion countries to support and promote implementation of the framework through strategic speaking engagements and supportive negotiation positions that are widely influential and accepted. We know all the problems and also the solution to overcome these problems. Let's join hands and do it, finally.
Thank you very much, Bruno. I would have liked to clap for your final words, because these are really exactly what we need to do. I would like to use the 17 minutes that we have left to try and be able to address some of the questions that have been asked in the chat. And I would like to emphasize some of the questions. I mean, of course, you will see that.
Oops. Sorry, we seem to have just lost Sébastien for a moment. Just while we do, does anyone in the house have a question? Anyone would like to ask a question to our panelists? Yes, here, Oriane, you can bring the microphone. Sorry, Sébastien, we just had a slight sound problem. I'm just going to pass the mic to someone here who's going to ask a question, and then we'll hand it back to you. Please.
Hi, thanks a lot for your very inspiring comments. His Serene Highness Prince Albert, as well as the other keynote speakers, have outlined the opportunity of the massive recovery plans that are being set up worldwide. So how do you reckon that this new fact that was unforeseen by the different negotiations that have been going on for a long time, how this opportunity can be harnessed by the different negotiations? Is it something that could be used at an international level, or is it mainly a national tool for implementing the commitments?
Sébastien, who do you think would be best to speak to that?
I don't know exactly who would be best, because to some extent all the speakers would be quite relevant. But I'd like to turn to Sophie again. I mean, being both in the representative of a national government, how do you see that the question of aligning recovery with ocean protection, how is that an object of international cooperation, or is that just for countries individually to observe?
In any case, for ocean protection and for ocean recovery, this is more than something that individual countries can take up. So in particular for something like that, but as well, it's our, let's say, our aim to build resilience, ocean resilience and other resilience against climate change coordination is absolutely vital.
Maybe I want to raise some other questions, and please, other members of the panel, don't hesitate to come back to this question of how aligning recovery with ambitious ocean protection, how that can be done. I wanted to pinpoint some questions that I found really very much in line with what you have been stating already. Ones that are really looking at what types of partnerships, innovative partnerships, can we build with the private sector and other non-state actors and governments. But not only, I mean, some of the questions are really tackling at the fact that what we need to do is to have partnerships that are able to unblock the political will in areas, in sectors where we already know that there is a lock-in, where we are in an unsustainable pathway of overexploitation of the marine resources. So how can we ensure that we build positively oriented initiatives with private sector in a way that is able to overcome the actors of the statu quo, those who don't want to change the sector as it is? I don't know if I would like to turn to that on Harriet. I know it's a little bit complicated to have a ready answer for that, but as you're analyzing over governance arrangements, maybe you have an idea on that, and I will don't hesitate to signal me from the panel who you if you would like to answer that question. Yes, thanks. Harriet, please.
Thank you so much, Sébastien. So in thinking about the types of partnerships that are effective in achieving the sort of triple goals of social, environmental, and economic progress that we see really at the heart of a lot of blue economy discussions, I think that from my own perspective in looking into science partnerships between countries often referred to as developed and those referred to as developing, a really crucial issue is to start at the very beginning by aligning the priorities and really meeting the needs of those who are most in need. And I think that in terms of those building partnerships from the very beginning, identifying the local needs and working out how to build capacity locally in the long term that's going to stay locally in the long term is really crucial. And as we look to sort of the recovery plans post-COVID, I think that we've seen that we can change on a global scale when we need to. And we can also see that I think that shows us that we still have a long way to go in the level of equity in a lot of partnerships that we do build. But I think it's the right time to be really stepping up ambition for those partnerships to be equitable from a social perspective as well as sustainable from an environmental one.
Thank you very much, Harriet. I saw that Vladimir was also trying to give an answer to that. Please.
Yeah,
Vladimir.
Thank you very much, Sébastien. You know, given the time, I would like to probably cover several questions, but also touching on the first one. So indeed, I think the paradigm is changing, and we see much stronger involvement of very good willing private sector in the many domains of ocean governance. I think this harmony is emerging slowly but surely. And what is happening in this particular case is that we, I think, with the science, with also communication, we are creating a more enabling environment for the private sector and also for the governments to work. One of these elements is, of course, advances in ocean literacy, and we are getting more literate governments, more literate private sector, and we are also embarking on with this domain to the schools. So to start with the youngest people. So I would like also to say that I believe that this Ocean Conference in 2022 now, the United Nations Conference, will be a huge opportunity to call on governments to establish national coordination committees for managing ocean matters. Also, IUCN will be quite influential in this. So I think we can join forces and try to at least announced that this is a big task to increase coordination on ocean matters. And I would like to respond to one of the questions in the chat that indeed, yes, together with Susan, with UNEP, we are working, and also together with Food and Agriculture Organization, we are now establishing links between the 2 decades of ocean science and ecosystem restoration. And so the science is the foundation for protection and for the restoration. So these links are coming, and the whole, I think, domain of working in the ocean, as I think, is getting more prominence, is getting more to the level of mainstream interest of governments and society. So we are getting there a little bit slowly, though, than is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe
I think Sebastian's asking me if we have more questions here, because we've also been communicating. Do we have another question from the House? Or should we go back to... Sebastian, it's okay. We're just having a little problem with your sound, if you can hear me.
Interrupt me. Is there?
Go ahead. Please stand up.
Can I go ahead? Or?
Yes, please stand.
Great. Thanks a lot. Sorry for interrupting, Sebastian. Thanks to the panelists for the views. I have a quick question. You've been talking about governance. My question is, how do you govern areas that we don't own? And in that regard, would, for example, indigenous knowledge, indigenous communities be in a position to help and to provide some elements of response to governing areas, large areas that we don't own? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me now?
Yes. Sebastian, who would you like to pass that question to about the influence of indigenous people?
Yeah.
All right, let me just step in while he's sorting out his sound. Would any of our other panelists, if you can hear me, who would like to weigh in on that question?
Careful of the fact that we need to really also have all the panelists speak.
I can do that.
Yes, please go ahead.
So, you know, in principle, I would like to say that indeed the indigenous knowledge and also position of indigenous people will be at least an element of the decade of ocean science. We openly and, you know, officially recognize them as equal partners. There is no mentorship relation with that. So indigenous people, indigenous knowledge, and also early career ocean professionals, you know, we would like to create a movement in which there is harmony. And indigenous people, they know how to live in harmony with Mother Nature. We need to learn from them in how to do this. So this is an important element. I only can agree with that remark. Thank you. Sorry for speaking twice.
I don't know if you can hear me now.
Yes, it's fine.
Yes, and sorry for my bad connection. I thought that was sorted out. And I wanted to relate this question with one of the questions by Ambassador Segura in the chat about the idea of a moral imperative of considering the ocean a global common, and to some extent that relates to also Harriet's comments on the need to be innovative in the legal status that we give to our global common and to the oceans. How would you assess the reception of such proposals supported, for instance, by France in global international negotiations to change the legal status as being a common? I would turn to Suzanne. Do you think that this is something that could be interesting and well received in negotiations, or is that too far away from what is negotiable?
Well, I'd like to broaden it a little more to cover my response to cover some of the other topics that's been brought up as well, because there's so many different points that we've had in these comments. One issue in terms of providing the incentives for investing in this type of work, I think relates to mainstreaming across the different ministries. And to do that, we need concrete examples of solutions that work. The how to do it, because I think so often we're talking across each other. And so, for example, with the Dasgupta report, where we could see and understand that, you know, we need technical innovation, but we also need behavior change, for example. we can see that raising public awareness can be really powerful in terms of consumer power, in terms of sending a message for political shifts, but also for market shifts. And ensuring that we're speaking in a way that will resonate across different ministries because we have the right metrics and the right kinds of solutions that are relevant to the work and the mandates of the different ministries, so this can be mainstreamed and it's not seen as something that just resides within an ocean mandate or an environment mandate. I think I appreciated what Richard Bailey put in the chat about the science roadmap, and as others have said before, this will be the thing that can bring us all together in terms of ensuring that we prioritize the most cost-effective and the most impactful solutions. So those were a few points that I wanted to add to this conversation. Thank you.
Sébastien, if I can just jump in, we just have about 5 minutes left for this Q&A, so why don't I let you, and I know it's difficult, do a wrap-up of just maybe 1 or 2 more questions and have a few people weigh in, and in 5 minutes' time we'll move on to your debrief of this session.
Thank you very much. That's a very good suggestion. I think one of the questions that I hope you're hearing me. One of the questions that I see in the chat. I wanted to mention the fact that some of the questions are actually a lot of comments on the fact that there is an interesting EU mission called Starfish 2030, where you would see the recommendations for aligning recovery with the ocean protection, and also the mention of the International Marine Protected Areas Conference number 5 in Vancouver, where some of the questions are what is needed there in terms of political statement. We see also some messages about the Med Fund that the Prince already mentioned, or the High Seas online dialogues that are co-organized by Belgium. So I mentioned them so that everybody has a look in the chat to really see what's there, and a lot of suggestions also by IUCN on what needs to be particularly looked at in terms of the BBNJ negotiation. I think one of the elements that I see particularly important, I mean, I like the question that I see in the chat about the extractive industry. That might be quite a provocative one, and that's the last one I would like to ask the panel. For those of you who have so in the chat you have a question where the person from the audience is saying that extractive industry on land is going to be extremely socially and environmentally harmful. So shouldn't we prepare for having the extractive industry just in the ocean? That's a provocative question, the way it's said, but maybe I'd like to have your vision on what we need to prepare for in terms of anticipatory governance of the extractive industry at sea. And I see Bruno Oberle. I won't be able to give the floor to all of you, and I'm very sorry for that, but Bruno, please go ahead. And those of you who want to also say something, please raise your hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sébastien. Extractive speaks to me because I was, before becoming a couple of months ago the new Director General of IUCN, I was chairing a global review to create a standard in the management of tailings and I worked very closely with the extractive industry on the future of their business, and this is very clear to me. Misbehavior in terms of not respecting the rights of local communities, not respecting legislation, not respecting the nature will not be accepted anymore in the years to come, and not by the general public, but by the investors. The investors don't want to be seen in relation with such bad behavior. And this is very, very clear to the extractive industry that they have to change and make a step in direction of sustainable management and extraction. It is clear that we need commodities in the year to come, even double as much as we have used in the past. I was the leader author of the Global Resource Outlook of IFP, and this figure is clear that the role of the extractive industry, it is not at stake. It is their behavior that has to be changed. And this is bring me back to a question about how to engage with the private sector, a question that it was asked at the very beginning. I mean, we can learn from the negotiation on the UNFCCC, on the biodiversity. It is more or less always the same. You have to make a comparison between long-term advantages of good behaviors and short-term advantages on good behavior. And you will convince at least the most innovative part of the industry that going with new practices is something that has return also in terms of economy and figure and access to capital. You have then to create playing level fields for everyone and support the weaker industry in the sector, alongside with the common but differentiated responsibility, guaranteeing transfer of technology as far as possible. This is what we could do with the extractive sector in the ocean management issue. And this we could start, and I will stop here, linking another question. We could start making this using the recovery investments, supporting the development or new behavior with new technologies in the future, in the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno. I know that Harriet would have liked to say something, but we need to close here, because to some extent what we have seen is that there is a lot of room for still looking at how to better anticipate things that are going to happen and how to prepare governance frameworks for that. So thank you very much for this. Jeannie, if you allow me, I'm just going to make some really final remarks of the wonderful things that the panel has been conveying to us. I think I retain three main points, but of course it's not completely systematic. The first is of course a lot of need for coherence at various levels between the international organizations, between sectoral policies or sectoral actors also at national scale. And I think we've been focusing a lot on the need to be very coherent when I see my connection is bad, sorry for that. That a lot of the emphasis needs to be on the aligning recovery stimulus packages with the ocean protection. The second realm of things that I saw very important in the panel discussion is about the need to mobilize the private sector. That was extremely present in the questions, and I think it was very important because it was both looking at how to mobilize better the resources really see how we can change the behavior of the private sector. So not being completely naive about the fact that the private sector would be voluntarily committing to very ambitious ocean protection commitments. So it's a negotiation process that we need to be on. And the third realm of very important remarks that I heard, I would say, is about the democracy of the ocean. To some extent, many of you have been talking about the fact that we need to voice the voice of people, to ensure that there is voice for people who are not heard for the moment. We also heard that it would be useful to voice the voice of the ocean itself. And I think that's really something where we still need to progress a lot. We know that these types of progresses in terms of our global democracy, our global governance are very important everywhere, but in particular when it comes to the ocean, where nobody is inhabiting the ocean itself, voicing the ocean, voting future generations, and voicing those who are not heard generally in political processes is something that is very important. So you've given us a lot of hope, a lot of tools also for the future of these negotiations, and I just wanted to thank you very much, all of the 6 panelists. And please apologies if I was not able to give you the time for a final remark, because you already had contributed with a lot of very rich comments in the 2 rounds of questions. Thank you very much for that. Jeannie, over to you.
Sébastien, thank you so much for that. I think all of you at home and all of us here in the house can give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much. Now, just to remind everyone, this entire conference is being covered by the IISD, the International Institute for Sustainable Development Reporting Services. You can get these recordings, see them again on their website, also on the MBI website, as well as the traditional MBI summaries. And we are counting on all of you, both here today and at home, to help spread the messages you've just heard and from this entire NBI. To do that, be sure to use the hashtag MBI2021. That hashtag should be appearing soon on screen, MBI2021. Thank you in advance for that. Now, don't forget, the MBI is organized as part of Monaco Ocean Week, a week completely dedicated to the ocean. You'll find the full program online on the website monacooceanweek.org. Thank you again to all of you for your continued efforts to protect the ocean and for your support to the Monaco Blue Initiative. We are going to take a break now. Please be sure to join us again this afternoon. Coming up, our second session, where we will have another elite panel of experts on hand to talk about the blue economy. So don't forget, if you're joining us from home, please connect 20 minutes in advance. That's 1:40 Monaco time, which is about 2 hours from now. We'll see you all back after lunch for session 2. Thank you again.